What's going on, everybody? So, it's been a while since I've made a video, and I don't know when I'm going to make another one again, but I thought this one would be a cool one. I think this is something that, like, having a good workflow for this is really important, especially in the age where a lot of us are working on music remotely together. And this is about exporting stems. I'm going to use the frame of reference as if I'm exporting stems to send to someone to mix, or these kind of things would also apply if you're sending something to someone to write drums for, or to write bass for, or to do vocals on, or to do like post-production on. Anytime you're kind of collaborating with others in the digital space, working on music together, right? So this is about how to export stems for mixing. I also want to preface this by saying that everything that I'm doing here in Studio One, you can do in any other DAW. The process may look a bit different for you and your software than it does for me and mine. You can think of this video as a roadmap, because it's very likely that you're going to have to stop at each section and you're going to have to Google, like, how do I do blank in my DAW? And that's okay. You just got to put in the time to get it figured out, and then you'll be off to the races, and you can help your mixing engineer avoid the soul crushing moment of frustration where we're shaking our fist at the sky saying, "Why, God, why have you forsaken me with such a mess of stems?" All right. So, all jokes aside, so the reason this is important is you can see here, all of these tracks here, they start at different points. They're different lengths. We want to make this so no matter what software someone is using, they can drop these files in and it be seamless, right? So the very first thing that it's important to do is go through and make sure your tracks are named. Just name them what they are, like, kick sub, kick trig, snare top, snare bottom, snare trig, toms, etc. Rhythm guitar L and rhythm guitar R are tones. We've got bass tone here, and then we've got bass DI and rhythm guitar DI and tones. We've got vocal tracks here, which I'm going to go through, and I'm going to make sure that I have all the plugins bypassed, right? So I know this video is boring. I know this is a boring subject, but it's something that's going to it really makes your life easy working with your friends in the digital domain. So now we've gotten all our plugins bypassed, so we're going to get the raw audio. And by the way, everything that we bypassed a plugin on, we want to zero out the volume, because assuming that things have been appropriately gain staged when they were tracked, nothing will clip if you zero the tracks out. If things do clip when you zero the tracks out, it's a good indication that you've got to go back in and you've got to readjust some gain staging, which is fine. It happens. And then you can export everything and you'll be good to go. All right. So, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just make a measure of silence here at the beginning of the song. Right click and choose insert silence in loop. So I've done that. I'm going to move my start marker back here, and then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to drag my MIDI out to measure 1. So the MIDI now starts at measure 1, and everything else has an empty measure before it, right? So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to render out my click track. In Studio One, you do that by clicking on this little wrench here, and then render, timeline start to song end. The click track and the MIDI serve two purposes. A lot of mixers, myself included, if I get MIDI, typically if I get drum prints and MIDI, typically I'll use the drum prints that I get sent, because it's kind of like the artistic intent of the song originally. And I feel like kind of preserving that and working with that, if it's good, makes sense. So I will. So the MIDI allows you to layer in kicks or snares or use it to make key spikes. But most importantly, the MIDI serves as your tempo map. When you drop that into a DAW, you're going to have the option to import the tempo with it, which helps. All right. So now my click track is rendered, and I'm just going to change the color of this. I'm just going to make it some wacky color here. Oh. I'm going to make this track a little bit bigger. I'm actually going to move it up here. And I'm going to name click track 00. Not sure why I have these automation lanes that it's dragging around, but whatever. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in here on my click track, And I'm going to make a cut here after the first blip of the click. And I'm going to copy this. So in Studio One, that's Control C on Windows, Command C on Mac. And then I'm going to take this single beat of click that I've clipped here, and I'm going to paste that in on every single track in the session. What I'm doing here is I am creating a sync point between the MIDI tempo map, the click track, and the sync point. When you drop all of these into a session, everything will drop in and line up perfectly. You know, based on where the sync point is, where everything needs to start. So now that all of my tracks have a sync point and everything starts at the same point, I'm going to go through and I'm going to unmute my DI tracks. I'll record tone on one track and DI on another track if I'm using hardware when I'm recording. Otherwise, I will print out guitar tones as well as DIs if I'm sending things off, and I like to be sent things this way. Again, if your guitar tones are good, I'm going to use them if I'm mixing your stuff. And again, that helps preserve the artistic integrity. Like if you've got sick tones, they may be different tones than what I'd dial in, but I'd still like them. I may dial in a tone that's a little bit different than what your thoughts are. So just send over tones and DI. So yeah, tones and DIs are good. And multi-output route of the drums, the good thing about multi-output routing the drums, I'm not sure if I already talked about this. If I did, I'll edit it out. Multi-output routing the drums is good because you have each element of the kick on its own track. And again, if I get sent drums and they sound good, I'm going to use them. All right, so now that I have everything unmuted, I've bypassed plugins, I've zeroed out the volumes on all the tracks. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go home to my desktop here. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it the name of the song. So we're going to just do song 1. And I'm going to put in the tempo, which I believe this is 220 BPM. And I'm also going to put the sample rate and bit depth that this song was recorded at here as well. This I did at 44.1 kilohertz, 44P1K, 24 bits, 24B. Bam. So the tempo and the sample rate and bit depth are in the folder name. So that helps whoever is dropping this in make sure things are set properly in their DAW. And now what I'm going to do is export the MIDI for the song. Like I said, I've got drums and bass MIDI. So I'm going to File, Save As in Studio One. And I'm going to change the Save As type to MIDI. And I'm going to find the folder on my desktop that I just made. Song 1. I'm going to save this here. Use MIDI format. So now I have MIDI, which the MIDI can be used as the tempo map when I open the song in another DAW. The next thing I'm going to do is in Studio One, it's Control-Shift-E, and this is how you can export stems. I'm going to make sure that I've got all of my audio tracks selected. So get all these, all the vocal tracks. I've deselected the buses because at this point it doesn't make much sense to send the buses because whoever's going to open this up on the other end is going to create their own buses and subgroups and that kind of thing. I'm going to remove the file name prefix because I want this to start with the numbers. So everything drops in and is sequenced by number. I'm going to select between song start and end marker. And I'm going to click and I'm going to find the folder on my desktop that I created. Desktop song 120. I'm going to select this folder. I'm going to hit OK. And now this is going to export my stems. You can see that clipping is here. Typically, if you're doing this for realsies, not just for the sake of making a video, you'll want to stop here. You'll want to find out what track was clipping, which was overheads. And you'd actually want to delete these and go back and turn everything down. So your overheads won't clip. But for the sake of this, I'm just showing you how to do this. So I'm not going to worry about deleting these. So now this is going to pop all this up. I've got my MIDI. I've got my audio tracks. So now I can actually save this, close it out. And this is a very important step when you're sending tracks off to be worked on. It's very important to create an empty session and drop these in. That way you can be sure that everything will drop in and play as it should. So the very first thing I'm going to do is in Studio One, the way you import the tempo map is you open up the tempo map there, and then you drag your MIDI in. Bam, it set the tempo. Now I can select my audio files and drag them in. And everything will populate as its own track. Everything has a sync point, and we can drop this in and it will play.
Fucking bass is fucking.
Now, of course, when you drop these in, things aren't going to be panned the way they should, which, you're going to go through and you're going to sort that out. You're going to pan things where they should land based on the name of the tracks, because we've gone through and we've numbered and named everything in a way that makes sense. So we know what is a left guitar, what is a right guitar. We know what is a left vocal, what is a right vocal. So we'll be able to go through and sort that out. And then we can color code everything, set up our routing, and then we're good to work on the track. And, same deal. Like if you're sending this to someone, if you're just sending guitar tracks to someone to write drums, they drop this in. It works. It's laid out in a way that makes sense. And then when they send it back to you, it drops right in. When you send it to your vocalist, they send it back. It drops right in. You send it to someone to be mixed, drops right in. Everything's smooth and it runs well, and everything turns out awesome. So yeah, just, walk through this, Google how to do all this in the DAW that you're using. If I knew how to do it in every DAW, I'd do a video for it. But I did this in Studio One because it's the DAW that I'm most comfortable in, that I use the most, and that I understand these processes the most in. So spend time with your DAW, spend time with your Google, figure out how to do this, and develop a system for it. And then, you'll be sending your tracks off to each other, and things will not be a pain in the ass for anybody, and we'll all drop in well, and everyone has fun. All right. Y'all take care.